So I just got a couple questions before you go into your talk, Pascal.
Okay.
It sounds like you had a very eclectic life, early life.
Yes.
And I was wondering how that all culminated into your interest in food and the aesthetics of food.
um, I'm half French and half English, as some of you know, and I have a rather eccentric family. Certainly, my parents are um, so very well travelled and interested in art and food and music, and so I was brought up in that milieu from a tiny age. And they exposed me to lots of different ways of life and different philosophies and different foods. And growing up in London, I think that's where all of that comes from. And my family is passionate about food, all of the French side of the family. There's an enormous number of them, and every meal would be a sort of gathering, and we'd be talking about what we'd be having for the next meal. So that's where that comes from.
Were there any particular dishes or types of food that really stuck in your early childhood memory?
So my grandmother, who I learnt to cook with, she was, if you imagine Julia Child, but make her French, that's my grandmother. So actually, when I read Mastering the Arts and I started looking at all the recipes, I'm sitting there thinking, well, this is her food. It was so familiar to me because it was absolutely the way my grandmother cooked. Very classic French cooking, lots of butter, lots of crème fraîche. But my mum preferred the food from the south of France, from Provence, and my grandfather came from Nice and the Côte d'Azur, so Mediterranean cooking. And in London, so I grew up in London, but we spent a lot of time in France. And so in London, we cooked mostly Mediterranean cooking.
Okay.
So I had a sort of foot in each camp, and that's how that came about.
Hence, do you have a lot of Mediterranean designs in your book?
Yes.
I mean, I think
well, that's the food that I gravitated towards more than classic French cooking. So I love the Mediterranean cooking, and that's really what this book is a celebration of.
I have one more question, and then I'll let you talk about flavor. And I was just wondering how you went about making food your life, not only your lifestyle, but your livelihood as well.
That's a long story.
Well, we're here.
So I did not go to culinary school. My background, I went to business school, and I have a background in business and marketing. That's what I studied at university, with the idea of going into the property development business. And I came out to America to work in that field for 1 year, and that was more than 30 years ago now.
Wow.
And I worked in the property business for 14 years. But at the same time, just had this, I mean, every time we traveled, it was to go to very special restaurants in France or in other countries. And I cooked a lot for a lot of the people that we worked with. Some of the property deals that we did, we would work in teams, and they'd be there for months on end. And rather than going out to restaurants at the end of the day, we'd say, come back for dinner. And so I started keeping notebooks to make sure I wasn't feeding them the same things all the time. So I still have, there are some years where there are 150 dinners. So it's just this constant cooking for a lot of people. And then I invested in restaurants, amazingly successfully, because restaurants often fail. And I was friends with certain chefs this was in LA. And there were chefs in LA who let me come into their kitchens and spend time in the kitchen with them. And after I did that, I realized two things. One, I never wanted to own a restaurant. Very quickly, I realized that you can never leave. And I like to travel a lot. And that being a professional chef in that capacity was not something that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it was only later when I came to, it's actually when I moved to Santa Barbara, after I left the property business, and I came here, and I was doing financial management to raise capital for small businesses, and at the same time decided to start a cooking school because I didn't want to open a restaurant. And the idea of the cooking school, basically the structure of the cooking classes was as if somebody was coming for dinner. So every class, and it's been like this since the beginning, and this year is 25 years since I've been teaching, and every single class is a 3-course meal, and in that time frame I've never repeated a class.
Wow.
So I've had to develop a lot of recipes over that period of time. And from writing the recipes for the classes, I then started writing for newspapers.
Yes.
And then I started writing, 15 years ago, I started writing for Edible Santa Barbara. So I've been a columnist for them since the beginning, since the first issue. And then it trickled into the books. So it sort of migrated from one business to the other. Yeah. It wasn't, I didn't say, I'm going to go to culinary school. Or I read a lot of cookbooks, and I collect cookbooks. I've got a lot of cookbooks from here. So I've ended up, they sort of feed my imagination.
Something tells me, though, that even when you were in the financial world, that you always had this in you. I just had this feeling. I don't know you very well, but I just had
I cooked a lot.
You cooked a lot.
Yeah, I cooked a lot, and we had. I think that's one of the things that, as a family, we've always done. We've always celebrated any excuse to have a dinner party, any excuse to get together, and so cooking for large numbers of people, that's never fazed me, because ever since I was little, that's what we do as a tribe. Yeah. we cook. So I don't find that overwhelming or difficult, and I like to express myself through the food. But I think I use food to it makes me happy to feed other people.
Nice.
So
nice.
My mother was very sweet, because it's been an interesting week. And I was feeling a little blue, and with the idea of going on the road and promoting this book, and she said, she's French, and she said, "Don't worry, you are delivering deliciousness." And I thought that was so sweet. So
that's wonderful.
And my son, who's here, he said, "Everyone needs good food, Mum. Just
we do.
Well, just go out there and talk about your book. It'll be fine."
So Flavor's coming at a perfect time. If you would like, how did it come about? Talk a little bit about Flavor now.
Yeah, this book. So I've been working. It took a year, just over a year, to write the book. Originally, I had another idea for a cookbook, and I was talking to my publisher, and the woman who's designed all my books actually said an interesting thing. She said, "Oh, the idea that you have is almost too specific for me." She goes, "I would never buy this book." And it stopped me dead in my tracks, because I've been working on this idea for a long time and developing a lot of recipes for that other book. And so I started to do a bit more research and think about it, and came to the conclusion that this book is technically the 5th book in the Market Table series. There was the salad book, then the book on fruit, and then the vegetable book, and then I wrote another salad book. Yeah. And this book now is the sort of culmination of all of that. Oh. So I took some of the ideas from the project that I was working on, which I'm not going to reveal because I'm still working on that project, and that might come out in another format. And then I thought, right, Flavor is going to encompass everything about seasonal eating. Oh. So that's how the idea for the book gelled. But really, it's about capturing the taste of each season. So one of the things I've been doing, and I've asked lots of people, what if I asked everybody what's the taste of summer? Does anyone have a taste of summer? Peaches. Okay.
Yeah.
Melon. Yeah. So and then okay, what's the taste of winter?
Soup.
Okay, so this is one of the things that I found. Most people when I ask about winter will describe the dish, not the taste.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to explore, what do those seasons really taste like? So to create the book, every week I go to the farmer's market and I buy up the things that were the freshest at the markets and come back and then look at them, and I would experiment with them and test recipes and share recipes with friends and decide which recipes we thought were good or not. And then through that process found what the taste of each season was, and that's what I was able to sort of put together. So the other books, the salad book, vegetable, so those are all ingredient driven books. Every chapter explores a different ingredient. So this one does the same, but the ingredients are gathered with each season.
Oh,
so that's how I put the book together. And as I was cooking through the seasons, things developed. So unlike the other books, in this one, at the beginning of each chapter is a 2-page spread. This is spring in a jar, but there's spring in a jar, autumn in a jar, summer in a jar. And the idea of this is that you make these things and then you keep those in your fridge and they will last a week, 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And they're things that you can use. So there's a herb pâté for each season. There's a different vinaigrette for each season. And it's really about delving into what is freshest. Because when I was a kid, shopping with my grandmother, you would buy what was in season and what was there. That's what was available. Now you go to the supermarket and it drives me crazy. In December, you find apricots.
yeah.
So apricots in December, it is not possible that they came from here. So they had to have come from the southern hemisphere. And they will not taste the way a freshly picked apricot is.
No.
Apricot season is so short. It's 6 weeks, 8 weeks? So same as cherries. So when you find these fruits completely out of season from where you live, they are just not going to taste the same. A tomato, a hothouse tomato picked in winter, is not going to have much flavor. We think of what the tomatoes are like in the summer, and they're juicy and just they're filled with sunshine. It's fabulous. So that's what I was trying to capture in every recipe in the book, and put that into each of the seasons. And it's mostly vegetarian. There are some fish recipes and a couple of chicken recipes, but for the most part it really is celebrating fruit and vegetables through the year.
So how long does this take you to go through this process of finding the taste, the flavors?
This so I worked solidly on the book for a year to put all the recipes, and I think I developed about 200 recipes, and there are 147 made it into the book. So there are certain recipes that I tested them and tried them, and sometimes they were too similar to something else, and other ones it was maybe the technique was not quite right. I don't like complicated food. There's nothing, you don't need a weird sous vide machine or some fancy piece of equipment. Some of the ingredient lists might be a little bit long because I love cooking with herbs, so there are lots of herbs in the books. But it's not complicated cooking. There are one or two, if I can find the picture, that might take a bit more time. The apricot tart might take a bit more time to make. Can I put my finger on it? this one. So it looks very fancy, and you think, oh, that's way too complicated. But basically, you're thinly slicing an apricot and putting it on a nut crust. It's not a complicated thing to do. So, I want it to taste. I want you to taste the seasons. I want you to be able to go through the book and say, yes, this is a bite of summer or a bite of winter or whatever it happens to be. That's the purpose of the book.
Does anybody have questions for Pascale?
Oh, you're going to be silent.
No pressure on
What's
you.
your favorite recipe?
My favorite recipe in the book? Oh gosh, that's impossible. It depends on the season. Because in the middle of winter, do you want a cold salad? Do you want a melon salad? Probably not. You want something that's going to warm you up. So it's going to depend on the season. But I mean, that apricot tart is a sort of favorite of mine. And there are certain things that I developed for the book. For the most part, I developed I would say 80% of the recipes in the course of that year. I developed specifically for the book. A couple of the recipes come from during COVID. During COVID, during lockdown, I couldn't teach. So I started doing Zoom classes with people. But I also did an Instagram Live. And I was doing Instagram Lives. I did every day for 100 days. And there were mini classes. And so some of the dishes that came out of that have made it into the book. And then you were talking about the multimedia book. So I did in between the second salad book and this, I did a food memoir called 9x12 Culinary Adventures in a Small Kitchen. And that's on Substack. It's not in print. Yeah. So I've taken a couple of the recipes from that food memoir and put them in here too, because they tell part of that narrative story. So that's where they come from.
Anybody?
So hard. That was a very long way to answer. I can't say a specific thing.
Really question?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Based on the seasons and local availability, what would you recommend for a holiday dinner this year out of your cookbook? Which recipes?
A holiday dinner. Which holiday?
Like, say, Christmas. Which ones would you recommend out of your cookbook this
So by Christmas, if we get any rain, there are mushroom recipes in here if you like mushrooms, and there's celeriac. So if you've does everyone know what celeriac is? Celery root. So I always, when I pick up a celery root at the market, I always laugh, because if you ever watched the Harry Potter movies, and does everyone know what a mandrake is? And she's and she picks up the mandrake and they scream. And I looked at that and I went, they used a celery root. I'm convinced that that's what they use, because it looks like that. So there is a recipe in the book that has celery root steaks, that are roasted with wild mushrooms on top. And I did a cooking class, and I can't remember how I titled the class, but there were some people who came to the class, and there was one gentleman who came and he said, well, where are the steaks? And I said, no, they're not. I said, this is a celery root steak. And he looked at his wife. He was very disappointed. And he was getting a bit worried. And afterwards he came up to me and he said, I will take that hands down over any steak. He said, that is amazing. You roast the celery root. It's fabulous. So I would do that.
Okay.
And it depends if you want fish or chicken, or if you want how much of a celebration you want to do. I like meals with lots of dishes that you can share. So I would do a whole selection of vegetable dishes, and maybe there's a roast chicken with Maya lemons and shallots in there. So that would be a good addition to that. And then there are desserts. Each season ends with sweet treats. So there's this a chocolate poudre de crème, which has orange in it, and there's an orange cake for winter. So either one of those.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's what I would do.
I was going to ask, what is the easiest thing in winter? What is the simplest winter recipe?
Invite
one of the-
Pascale to your house.
What is the simplest winter recipe?
Pick an easy one.
Okay, there are some soups that are very there's it sounds, I mean, Romanesco broccoli and leek soup. Does everyone know what Romanesco broccoli looks like?
Beautiful.
Those spiral. It's the perfect representation of the Fibonacci scale. I always refer to them as Fibonacci broccoli because of that spiral shape, but that color. So this is that soup.
Oh, it's fabulous.
And you're cooking up the broccoli with the leeks, and then you puree it, and voila. Not complicated. Not complicated. This roasted. This is yummy with black rice. The roasted. This would be a great dish for Thanksgiving as well. The kabocha squash, or you could use butternut squash or delicata squash, roasted with red onions and put on forbidden rice, that nutty black rice.
Oh.
Yeah, that's yummy. It's not complicated. Some of the presentation, so this looks complicated, but it's not. Basically, they're all different types of radishes and beets that have been thinly sliced and arranged in a pretty pattern. If this seems like too much trouble, just put them all in the bowl and toss them, and they'll be fine. It'll still taste the same, right? It won't. I mean, obviously, this was arranged to be able to put it in the book, so carefully placing all the different things. So.
One more question. Now's your chance.
But I will.
Do you do all the photography?
I did.
Yes.
For this book, I shot the whole thing myself
On your phone?
on my phone.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. I researched. I used to use a Nikon, and digital photography now, you link up the camera to a computer screen so that you can shoot it so that if you're moving something on the set that you've set up, you can see what that is. And we used to have an overlay on the screen, which is exactly the size of the page, so that we could see. And I like to shoot in daylight, and I used to work with a photographer called Mike Verbois, and he shot almost all the other books, and I started doing more of the photography with Salade too, the second Salade book. And this one, I shot the whole thing. And part of that started during COVID, because I was photographing a lot of stuff for Instagram and for social media, and trying to connect with people. We all had to learn new skills. So I would shoot it on my phone, because then I could post it directly from my phone. And then I started researching different phones, and I found a phone that was fantastic. The quality it has 5 lenses.
Oh.
And it's an amazing phone. And so the entire book was shot on my phone.
That's amazing.
I should call the phone company and
phone
tell.
What? Plug the phone now.
Plug the phone. It is a Samsung S23 Ultra.
Okay.
It looks like this. It has 5 lenses. And so I have a tripod for the phone, and then I could shoot, straight down or different things. And I have, reflectors and everything else, but everything was shot in natural daylight. And I have I do my own food styling as well. So I have tons of props and china and different knives and forks and linens and things. So it's a lengthy process.
Well, it was all worth it, because Flavour is a truly beautiful book.
Thank you so much.
Pascale, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.